Welcome to this new car news video for Saturday, April 4th, 2026. Today we're going to talk about Stellantis, where the streak of bad luck continues with yet another recall of several 100,000 vehicles due to a rather dangerous reliability issue. We'll actually have a second piece of news about Stellantis today, since the group has just announced a partnership with the Chinese brand Leapmotor to avoid paying CO2 fines to the European Commission. We'll also talk a little bit about that. French auto legal news with a new class action lawsuit filed against the highway companies for the completely outrageous rates they've been charging for several years. We'll also discuss Ford, which has found an original way to keep selling internal combustion cars during the fuel crisis. About Mercedes, which has decided to invest several billion euros to relocate its German production to another continent. And finally, we'll talk about General Motors, the huge American automotive group that has just done the same. Just like Stellantis did a few months ago to announce a major pullback from its electric vehicle transition plans. These are the topics for this Saturday. I hope you'll find the video interesting. If that's the case, I'm counting on you, as usual, to show it by leaving a like and subscribing, boosting this video. That's really the most important thing. If you want to help my channel's ranking and give it more visibility, it all happens with the little boost button under the video. And of course, by also leaving a little comment where you share your thoughts on today's news. Let's start with some news. Stellantis, since the group has just announced that it is extending its partnership with the Chinese brand Leapmotor. When it comes to CO2 credits, the CO2 market in Europe is absolutely insane. Insane. Since the European Commission can fine a company if it believes that the company's activities have emitted more CO2 than the target set by that same commission. Last year, Stellantis bought CO2 credits from Tesla since Tesla only sells electric cars. Their automotive operations are seen as environmentally neutral. They can sell their annual carbon credits from the European Commission to other brands. This year, Stellantis decided to do without Tesla and to work with Leapmotor. In reality, here it's really a tax loophole since Leapmotor is Chinese, but 21% of it is owned in Europe by Stellantis. In fact, when Stellantis buys carbon credits from Leapmotor, it's kind of like they're buying their own carbon credits. So it's planned in 2026 that the Stellantis group will buy 350 million euros worth of carbon credits from Leapmotor, which, let me remind you, and I've already said this in this video, is a Chinese brand. Which means that indirectly, with this carbon credit system, the European Commission is forcing European manufacturers to finance Chinese brands. Really a real piece of work. Speaking of masterpieces, let's talk about Stellantis, where the streak of bad luck continues. Since the recall I mentioned to you a few days ago in a video which concerned 212,000 cars in France. For a problem related to hybrid powertrains where too little space was found between several engine components in its hybrid system. More specifically, between the particulate filter, which gets very hot when the car is running, and one of the alternator starter's terminals. It is possible that when the car gets very hot under certain conditions, it could create an electrical spark, which could ultimately, in the most serious cases, cause the vehicle to catch fire. This impacts many Stellantis models, and a few days ago we learned it involves at least 212,000 cars in France. Well, we just learned that in reality, on a European scale and even worldwide, there are actually many more vehicles affected. It's 700,000 cars, just to pay for the labor needed to check these 700,000 cars to see if the problem is present or not. This recall is already probably costing tens of millions of euros, and that's bad luck for Stellantis, which hasn't been doing well since 2025. By the way, speaking of a brand that's not doing well, we have Ford, which has found a rather original way to keep trying to sell internal combustion cars during this fuel crisis. Ford has launched an original offer since it gives its customers who buy a new internal combustion or hybrid car a fuel card credited with 2,500 euros. So this doesn't apply to all models, and it's mainly for vehicles that are already in stock. It doesn't apply to future orders for vehicles that haven't been produced yet, and it's valid from April 1st while supplies last for the eligible vehicles. In the United States, it's the General Motors Group that is announcing a rather massive step back on all-electric vehicles. Well, it's not the first time, since in 2025 the brand had already slammed the brakes on quite a few electric car projects. We might think it doesn't concern us since it mainly affects the American market and General Motors isn't widely distributed in Europe. But it's still quite a significant setback, which is not trivial and actually reflects a major global problem: the demand for electric cars. I talked about it in a video a few days ago. In reality, it's only in Europe where electric car sales are increasing. Everywhere else, especially in the two main markets, China and the United States, electric vehicles are really taking a hit. So, regarding General Motors, we have to go back to 2021 to get to the root of the story. At the time, the group had invested $2 billion to transform one of its factories in the American city of Detroit into a gigafactory. This site was intended to be central to General Motors' all-electric strategy and help it dominate the U.S. electric vehicle market. 5 years later, the situation on site is very different, since as of March the 16th, so it's been almost 3 weeks now. The production lines on site are at a complete standstill, and they are not expected to restart before mid-April. A month-long pause. This is explained by the fact that for now, American customers are still not rushing to buy General Motors electric cars or electric cars in general. Except for Tesla, which is doing well, the others are struggling. It's a complicated situation. Since last year, in the fall of 2025, General Motors had already laid off half of the employees working there, sensing that the electric car market was not growing fast enough. 50 kilometers from this factory, another General Motors plant is abandoning its expansion plans related to electric vehicles. A factory that is being urgently reconfigured to produce vehicles powered by, drumroll, V8 gasoline engines. Another 50 kilometers further towards the northwest of Detroit. The Flint factory is massively rehiring and opening production lines there to produce internal combustion cars. On the European side, at Mercedes, it was just announced that the group will invest 7 billion euros to relocate part of its German production to the United States. This is largely due to tariffs, which heavily penalized Mercedes last year. Let us remind you, in the United States, when you want to buy a car that was made in Europe, there is a 15% surcharge. This means that German cars there are much, much more expensive than the American competition. And so, sometimes, customers end up preferring to buy an American car rather than a German one. Mercedes already has factories in the United States, which allows them to manufacture cars locally and avoid tariffs. But it's simply not enough. On one hand, so they will invest $4 billion by 2030 to relocate part of the production of their GLC SUV, which until now was manufactured in Germany. And in total, between these different American sites, $7 billion will be invested by 2030 to modify the production lines, to create new ones, or to change the existing lines. To produce more cars, like, for example, the production lines for the EQS electric SUVs, whose production lines were 80% idle. So, Mercedes is revealing its strategy to fight tariffs, but what it doesn't have to reveal is the impact this will have on its European production. Because obviously, when you produce more in one place, when you don't sell more, there is inevitably another place where you will have to produce less. And that, in general, always ends up resulting in layoffs, or at the very least, staff reductions. To finish, we're going to talk about a new class action lawsuit, a collective complaint led by attorney Legvac. We already talked about him before because he's the one leading it, especially the class action lawsuits against Stellantis for reliability issues related to the 1-liter PureTech engine. But also, I believe, regarding the blue dye case. This class action lawsuit has been filed before the Council of State, and it challenges the legality of the toll price increases applied since 2022 across the entire country. On average, since 2022, that's a 2.3% increase in rates per year. According to Maitre Legvac, the increase is simply illegal. He has several legal arguments that form the basis of this challenge. The first is that since the 1990s, the increase in toll prices has been calculated using a mathematical formula, which includes general French inflation. However, under French law, automatic indexation to inflation is generally prohibited. The second argument is that the legal nature of the toll is considered a fee for services rendered. As such, the amount that users pay is supposed to remain proportional to the actual cost of the infrastructure and its operation. Several public reports in recent years have already highlighted the high profitability of the concessionaire companies. For example, a report from the General Inspectorate of Finance estimates that the cost of a Paris-Lyon trip is about 15 euros, compared to the 36 euros that are currently actually charged to customers. At the same time, the toll sector shows particularly high profitability. According to the Transport Regulatory Authority, concession companies generated a turnover of 12 billion euros in 2023, for example, with a net margin, believe it or not, of 36%. At this stage, the outcome of the procedure remains, of course, uncertain, especially since this is really the first time that a collective action of this scale has been taken against toll companies to truly challenge the overall functioning of the highway toll system. In the meantime, if you also believe that you have paid too much in tolls, you can join this collective action. Registration costs 36 euros, and Maitre Legvac's law firm estimates that participants could eventually receive a refund of 30 to 58% of the amounts paid by highway users between 2022 and 2026. That's it. We've covered the news for this Saturday. See you again tomorrow for the last video of the week. In the meantime, of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to show your support by leaving a like. Subscribe for upcoming videos, and why not become a supporting member of my channel using the join button. See you tomorrow. Ciao.